For 12 years, Ezra McGillicuddy had been the most predictable drunk in all of Colorado Territory. Every morning at exactly 9 a.m., he would stumble out of Murphy's Saloon and collapse in the same 5 spots around Silver Creek, following a route so precise you could set your watch by it. The townspeople laughed at his consistency, children would gather to watch his daily performance, and local business owners placed bets on which spot he'd hit first. But when federal agents finally discovered what Ezra was really doing during his drunken falls, they realized that the town drunk had been operating the most sophisticated underground railroad tunnel system in the American West. Ezra McGillicuddy had arrived in Silver Creek, Colorado, in the spring of 1871, carrying himself with the bearing of a man who had seen better days but hadn't quite given up hope of seeing them again. At 42 years old, he possessed the weathered features and calloused hands of someone who had worked hard for most of his life, though the slight tremor in his fingers and the careful way he moved suggested that those working days were behind him. He claimed to be a former railroad engineer whose drinking had cost him his job, a story that was common enough on the frontier that no one questioned it too closely. Silver Creek was a thriving mining town nestled in a valley where 2 streams converged, creating the kind of natural transportation hub that attracted both legitimate settlers and people who preferred to avoid too much scrutiny about their past or their business. The town's population of nearly 3,000 included miners, merchants, railroad workers, and a steady stream of travelers heading west to California or north to Canada. The combination of rapid growth and constant movement made Silver Creek an ideal place for someone to blend in and establish a new identity, regardless of what they might be running from. Ezra quickly established himself as a fixture in the town's social landscape, though not in the way most newcomers hoped to be remembered. Within weeks of his arrival, he had developed a reputation as a harmless drunk who could be counted on to provide entertainment through his spectacular public failures to remain upright. His daily routine became as reliable as the sunrise. He would emerge from Murphy's Saloon just as the town was beginning its morning activities, attempt to walk to various destinations around town, and inevitably collapse in dramatic fashion at predictable locations. The townspeople initially viewed Ezra's drinking problem with a mixture of pity and amusement. Frontier communities were accustomed to men who had been broken by hard living, and a drunk who provided comic relief without causing serious trouble was generally considered more of an asset than a liability. Children would follow Ezra at a safe distance, giggling at his exaggerated staggers and betting on where he would fall next. Adults would shake their heads sympathetically while secretly enjoying the daily spectacle of someone whose problems made their own seem manageable by comparison. What made Ezra's condition unusual was not the fact that he drank heavily. That was common enough, but the extraordinary consistency of his behavior. Most drunks were unpredictable, prone to sudden mood swings, violent outbursts, or periods of coherent conversation that revealed glimpses of their former selves. Ezra, by contrast, was remarkably stable in his instability. He fell in the same locations, at the same times, following the same route every single day with mechanical precision that was almost unnatural. The 5 spots where Ezra regularly collapsed became local landmarks in their own right. The first was directly in front of the First National Bank, where he would stumble against the hitching post and slide dramatically to the ground. The second was outside Chen's Laundry, where he would trip over an apparently invisible obstacle and land sprawled across the wooden sidewalk. The third was near the entrance to the Methodist Church, where he would grab frantically at the air before crashing into a convenient pile of hay. The fourth was behind the general store, where he would disappear from public view for several minutes before emerging disheveled and confused. The fifth and final stop was at the town well, where he would attempt to steady himself against the stone rim before sliding slowly to the ground in a performance that combined physical comedy with genuine pathos. Local business owners began to incorporate Ezra's falls into their daily routines. The bank manager would time his arrival at work to coincide with Ezra's first collapse, using the drunk's performance as a signal that the business day was officially beginning. The pastor of the Methodist church would watch from his window to ensure that Ezra's fall near the church entrance didn't result in actual injury, though he seemed remarkably resilient for someone who spent so much time hitting the ground. The proprietor of the general store would use Ezra's visit to the back of his building as an opportunity to step outside and check his inventory, knowing that the drunk's presence would provide a convenient distraction from any business he might need to conduct away from curious eyes. What none of them realized was that Ezra's apparently random movements were actually carefully choreographed signals that communicated vital information to a network of people who desperately needed to know when it was safe to move through Silver Creek. Each fall corresponded to a specific entrance to an underground tunnel system that Ezra had spent months excavating beneath the town's main street. Each location had been chosen for its strategic importance in guiding runaway slaves, escaped prisoners, and other fugitives along a hidden route that could transport them safely from the Southern Territories to the Canadian border. The tunnel system that Ezra had created was a masterpiece of frontier engineering, carved by hand using tools that he had acquired gradually over the course of several years. The main tunnel ran for over half a mile beneath Silver Creek's business district, connecting natural caves with hand-dug passages that emerged at carefully concealed locations throughout the town. Each entrance was hidden beneath structures or geographical features that would provide cover for people entering or leaving the underground network. The entrance behind the bank corresponded to Ezra's first daily fall, where his collision with the hitching post served as a signal that the tunnel beneath the building was clear and safe for use. The laundry provided access to a passage that connected to a network of natural caves that extended for miles into the surrounding mountains. The church entrance led to a tunnel that emerged near the railroad tracks, allowing fugitives to board freight trains without being seen by station personnel. The general store concealed an entrance to the main transportation tunnel that could move people quickly across the entire length of the town. The town well provided access to a vertical shaft that connected to multiple horizontal passages, serving as a central hub for the entire network. Ezra's system was not just about providing physical passages for people to travel through. It was also a sophisticated communication network that allowed him to coordinate with helpers throughout the region. His daily falls served as a status report that informed observers about the current security situation in each part of town. A normal fall indicated that the area was safe and the tunnel entrance was available for use. A particularly dramatic collapse suggested that extra caution was needed due to increased surveillance or the presence of bounty hunters. A fall that was delayed or omitted entirely meant that the tunnel was temporarily closed due to immediate danger. The psychological genius of Ezra's method lay in the fact that his cover identity was so convincing that it became invisible. People expect drunks to behave erratically, to fall down in public, to mumble incoherently, and to be present in places where they don't obviously belong. By embracing this stereotype completely, Ezra had created a persona that allowed him to move freely throughout the town, observe potential threats, and communicate with his network without arousing any suspicion. His apparent weakness and vulnerability made him the last person anyone would suspect of organizing a sophisticated criminal operation. The operation that Ezra coordinated was far more complex than simply providing tunnel access to fugitives. He worked with a network of sympathetic individuals throughout Colorado Territory and beyond, including abolitionists, reformed criminals, religious leaders, and even some law enforcement officials who had become disillusioned with their roles in enforcing unjust laws. Messages would arrive through seemingly innocent channels: a particular arrangement of goods in a store window, a specific hymn sung during church services, or a coded conversation overheard in the saloon, informing Ezra about groups of people who were approaching Silver Creek and needed safe passage to the next station on their journey to freedom. When fugitives arrived in Silver Creek, they would be directed to observe Ezra's daily routine and interpret his signals according to instructions they had received from other network members. A family of escaped slaves might spend several days hiding in the mountains outside town, watching Ezra's performances and waiting for the specific combination of falls that would indicate it was safe to enter the tunnel system. During their underground journey, they would be guided by markers and supplies that Ezra had placed throughout the passages, including food, water, blankets, and detailed instructions for reaching the next safe house on their route north. The success of Ezra's operation was measured not just in the number of people he helped escape to freedom, but in the fact that his activities remained completely undetected for over a decade. Bounty hunters would arrive in Silver Creek with detailed descriptions of fugitives they were tracking, only to find that their quarry seemed to have vanished without a trace. Law enforcement officials would conduct thorough searches of the town, never realizing that the people they sought were traveling safely beneath their feet. Most remarkably, federal agents who specialized in disrupting underground railroad networks would visit Silver Creek regularly, gathering intelligence and interviewing residents, while the town drunks stumbled past them every morning without attracting even a moment's suspicion. The scale of Ezra's operation became clear only years later, when federal investigators were able to piece together records from various sources and estimate the scope of his activities. Between 1871 and 1883, Ezra's tunnel system had provided safe passage for over 800 individuals, including escaped slaves, military deserters, political refugees, and witnesses fleeing from criminal organizations. His network had connections to similar operations in 12 states and territories, making it one of the most significant transportation links in the entire Underground Railroad system. The personal cost of maintaining his cover for so many years was enormous. Ezra had to live constantly with the knowledge that a single mistake could result in the capture and probable death of the people he was trying to protect. He endured daily humiliation, allowing an entire community to see him as a failure and a source of amusement. He sacrificed any possibility of forming genuine relationships or building a normal life, knowing that maintaining his cover identity required him to remain isolated and apparently unreliable. Perhaps most challenging of all, Ezra had to actually drink enough alcohol to make his cover convincing, while remaining sober enough to carry out the complex tasks required by his underground operation. This balancing act required extraordinary self-discipline and physical tolerance, as he had to appear intoxicated during his public performances while maintaining the mental clarity needed to excavate tunnels, coordinate with his network, and guide fugitives to safety. The long-term effects of this lifestyle on his health were severe, but Ezra considered them an acceptable price to pay for the lives he was saving. The beginning of the end for Ezra's operation came in 1883, when changes in federal law enforcement priorities led to increased scrutiny of suspected Underground Railroad activities. A new generation of investigators, trained in more sophisticated detection methods, began to notice patterns in the movement of fugitives that suggested the existence of organized transportation networks. Silver Creek's reputation as a place where people could disappear made it a natural target for investigation. The federal agent assigned to investigate Silver Creek was Marcus Kane, a methodical investigator who specialized in uncovering long-term criminal operations. Kane's approach was different from that of previous investigators who had visited the town. Rather than focusing on obvious suspects or conducting dramatic searches, he began to analyze the subtle patterns of daily life in Silver Creek, looking for anomalies that might reveal hidden activities. Kane quickly noticed that Silver Creek had an unusually low success rate for bounty hunters and fugitive recovery operations. People who were clearly heading toward the town would simply vanish, with no evidence of where they had gone or how they had managed to avoid detection. This pattern suggested not just lucky coincidences, but systematic assistance from some form of organized network. What ultimately drew Kane's attention to Ezra was not suspicious behavior, but rather the absence of any variation in what should have been chaotic behavior. Kane observed that while genuine alcoholics were unpredictable and prone to injury, Ezra's falls were remarkably consistent and never seemed to result in serious harm. His daily routine was too precise, his collapses too well-timed, and his recovery too quick for someone who was genuinely incapacitated by alcohol. Kane began conducting discreet surveillance of Ezra's activities, following him during his daily routine and observing his behavior when he thought no one was watching. What Kane discovered was that Ezra's movements during his supposed blackout periods were far more purposeful than his public persona suggested. During the minutes when he disappeared from view behind buildings or fell in locations that concealed him from observers, Ezra was actually conducting reconnaissance, checking tunnel entrances, and leaving signals for other network members. The investigation that followed Kane's discovery of Ezra's true activities revealed the full scope of the Underground Railroad network that had been operating beneath Silver Creek for over 12 years. Federal agents who searched the tunnel system found evidence of hundreds of successful escape operations, including personal items left behind by grateful fugitives, supplies that had been stockpiled for future operations, and detailed maps showing connections to similar networks throughout the Western Territories. The exposure of Ezra's activities created a sensation that extended far beyond Silver Creek. Newspapers throughout the country reported on the story of a town drunk who had fooled an entire community while operating one of the most successful underground railroad stations in American history. The tunnel system he had created was recognized as an engineering marvel that rivaled the complexity of urban subway systems, while his cover identity was studied as a masterpiece of long-term deception. For the people of Silver Creek, the revelation of Ezra's true identity was both shocking and transformative. Residents who had laughed at his daily falls were forced to confront the reality that they had been witnessing acts of extraordinary courage and compassion. Children who had mocked his clumsiness learned that they had been in the presence of a hero whose dedication to justice had required him to sacrifice his dignity and reputation. Business owners who had used his falls as entertainment realized that they had been unwitting participants in a life-saving operation that had made their town a beacon of hope for people fleeing oppression. The legal proceedings that followed Ezra's exposure were complicated by the changing political landscape of the 1880s. While Underground Railroad activities had clearly violated federal fugitive slave laws, the abolition of slavery had made those laws obsolete, and many of the people Ezra had helped were no longer considered criminals under current statutes. More importantly, public opinion had shifted dramatically in favor of recognizing Underground Railroad operators as heroes rather than criminals. Ezra's trial became a national focal point for discussions about civil disobedience, moral courage, and the responsibility of individuals to resist unjust laws. Prominent abolitionists, religious leaders, and political figures testified on his behalf, arguing that his actions had served the cause of justice and human dignity. The prosecution struggled to make a case against a man whose crimes had consisted of helping people escape from slavery and oppression. The verdict was perhaps inevitable. Ezra was found guilty of violating federal fugitive slave laws, but was sentenced to time already served, effectively freeing him while acknowledging the technical illegality of his actions. The judge's statement at sentencing recognized that while Ezra had broken the law, he had served a higher moral purpose that deserved recognition rather than punishment. Ezra's life after the trial was dramatically different from his years of secret operation. He was invited to speak at abolitionist gatherings, consulted by historians documenting Underground Railroad activities, and celebrated as a hero by communities throughout the country. But the years of maintaining his cover had taken a permanent toll on his health and his ability to form normal relationships. The tunnel system that Ezra had created beneath Silver Creek was preserved as a historical landmark, with guided tours that allowed visitors to experience the underground network that had provided salvation for so many desperate people. The 5 locations where Ezra had staged his daily falls were marked with bronze plaques that explained their significance in the Underground Railroad network, transforming sites of apparent failure into monuments to secret heroism. Ezra McGillicuddy died in 1892, 9 years after his cover was blown, surrounded by some of the people whose lives he had saved through his Underground Railroad operation. His funeral was attended by hundreds of individuals who had never forgotten the debt they owed to the man who had pretended to be a pathetic drunk while actually serving as their guardian angel. The inscription on his gravestone, chosen by the former fugitives he had helped, reads simply, "Ezra McGillicuddy. He fell down so others could rise up." The legacy of Ezra's work extended far beyond the individual lives he had saved. His methods were studied and adapted by other Underground Railroad operators, and his example inspired countless others to find creative ways to resist injustice. The town of Silver Creek became a symbol of the hidden networks of compassion and courage that had operated throughout American history, often in places and through people that seemed least likely to harbor such extraordinary moral purpose. The drunk who had been seen as Silver Creek's most predictable failure had actually been its most unpredictable success. A man whose apparent weakness had been transformed into strength through dedication to a cause greater than himself. His daily falls had lifted up hundreds of people who had fallen into circumstances beyond their control, proving that heroism could take forms that were as surprising as they were effective. In the end, Ezra McGillicuddy's story became a reminder that the most important battles for justice are often fought in secret by people whose true contributions are not recognized until long after their sacrifices have changed the world. His willingness to be seen as a failure in order to help others succeed demonstrated that genuine heroism sometimes requires the courage to be misunderstood, mocked, and pitted by the very people you are working to protect. If you're enjoying these incredible, true stories of hidden heroism and secret sacrifices, hit that subscribe button because we've got many more tales of ordinary people who used extraordinary methods to fight injustice waiting for you. Click on the video on your screen to hear another story about someone who discovered that sometimes the greatest strength comes from apparent weakness, proving that heroes come in forms we never expect and work in ways we never imagine.